watching this free video tutorial from mographplus.com. If you are interested in learning Arnold 5 for Cinema 4D fundamentally, please make sure to check out our Ultimate Introduction to Arnold 5 for Cinema 4D course, which is a massive 10-hour long course in which we explore all the aspects of Arnold for Cinema 4D thoroughly. Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome back to mographplus.com, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to make a realistic painted wood shader in Arnold for Cinema 4D, and we're going to be using this image as our general guideline. So as you can see in this example, obviously when you're dealing with something like painted wood, and specifically this example, the shader that we need to have in mind and to create is paint, is plastic and not wood. So that's very important, and when you are actually dealing with the IOR or the Fresnel reflectivity value, you need to use a lower value compared to when you make a wood shader, for example. Probably something like 2 would be good enough for this example here. Also, we can see the underlaying wood here in these worn out edges, and also in some other areas in these spots, as you can see here, when the paint doesn't have a good enough structural integrity. So we can actually see that, for example, here on this spot. First of all, we need to create this paint, this green paint example. Then we create this underlaying wood shader. Then we basically create an alpha map for these worn out edges and for these spots. And that way this underlaying wood would basically only show up on the areas that we want. Now for the paint itself, as you can see, this green paint, its base color is green, but it's not one solid color. You can see we have different shades of that particular green color. So we need to have a sort of complex texture that would control the base color for this green paint. You can see it's fairly reflective. We have some variance in the specular weight and in the specular roughness. Also, we have quite a visible bump mapping. If you take a look at these areas that are being lit directly by the light source, you can see we have this very kind of strong bump mapping. So we need to take that into consideration as well. Now, the final render would be something like this. Okay, for our green paint, and this one for the black paint. So we'll be creating these two shaders. But if you have been following us, we have released a few of these kind of how to make a specific shader in Arnold for Cinema 4D. Tutorial number 66, tutorial number 68. So you need to check that out, because I'm actually going to change the way I record these tutorials, and instead of constructing the shader from scratch, which is gonna take a very long time, I'm gonna show you, and basically I'm gonna deconstruct the material. I'm gonna start the lesson with the shader finished and ready, and then I'm just gonna show you how I made it. So we're gonna be doing it a lot faster, and it's extremely imperative that you watch the tutorial number 66 and tutorial number 68, and also our Ultimate Introduction to Arnold 5 for Cinema 4D course at our website mographplus.com, so you have a solid foundation in Arnold for Cinema 4D before actually watching this. So let me close my picture viewer, and this is the scene that we are having. As you can see, we have the sideboard model, and we have our green painted wood. This is the final shader that we're going to be I'm going to walk you through how I made it. Basically deconstruct the shader, and this is going to be the basically black painted wood. Okay, so let's get started. Right now this shader, this green paint, is applied to this basically model here. Let me just run the IPR. Okay, so let me open up the shader by middle clicking on it, and just delete this extra stuff. So if I come down here, this is basically the green paint standard shader that we have, and if I press Alt W and V and connect it to the Arnold Beauty, you can see the shader that we have here. Now, before actually going through these textures and this map, let me just control drag this and connect the standard surface shader itself directly to the Arnold Beauty port. you can see the base weight here is set to 1, and basically we're trying to create a paint, right? So the base weight is set to 1. We have a simple green color for the time being as our base color. Then we have a specular weight of 0.2, a roughness of 0.2. It really depends on how sharp or rough you want the paint to be, so 0.2 is enough. And the IOR value, as I mentioned, because we're not dealing with wood, which normally has a Fresnel reflectivity or an IOR value of 3 or 3.5 or something like that, we are using a lower IOR value of 2. And basically this is our main standard surface shader, and now we're trying to control our base color, our specular weight, and our specular roughness with different textures. Now for the base color, as I mentioned and as we saw in our reference, it wasn't one simple solid color, it was different shades of green. So this is basically the layer color. I've just changed its title color here. This is the layer color that basically controls the base color of our standard surface shader, right? Now let me show you what are the layers that we have. So as you can see here, we have 6 different layers with different shades of green, and in these two layers, layer 3 and layer 4, we are only multiplying a black and white texture. So for our layer 1, as you can see, we have simply this green color. For our layer 2, we have this brighter green, okay? And for the layer 2 alpha, if I just actually go ahead and disable my layer 3 to 6, for layer 2 alpha, we are using this image BW4 that you can find in the project file. And we are simply using a RAM float node, which doesn't exactly do anything here, so we can connect this directly if you wanted to. So this is our layer 2 alpha, okay? Then we have a third layer, and what this layer is doing, first of all, this is the image that is connected to layer 3, and it's basically multiplied over the layer 1 and layer 2. If I increase its layer alpha, as you can see, sorry, if I just connect the layer color itself and increase the layer 3 alpha, you can see how it's basically making and adding these darker spots, but we just need to set the layer alpha to about 0.2 so it won't be that effective. Then for layer 4, if I just enable that, we just have a very small amount of effect from this layer. As you can see, the layer 4 alpha is set to 0.02. So, and as you can see, what we're doing is we're basically, if I connect this map, this is the map that is connected to layer 4. Then we are simply using a RAM float node to make the brighter spots a bit darker because we don't want this map to be that effective. And finally, in the layer color node itself, the alpha for this layer, the opacity for this layer is set to 0.02, so 2%. It's barely adding anything, but if you compare it, it just adds that little subtle detail that I'm looking for. And for our layer 5, then we are using obviously this brighter shade of green, and to control its alpha, we are using this map, which is BW5, and a RAM float to basically make it a bit darker, to make the brighter parts and the brighter values of the map a bit darker to about 0.35. And this is going to be controlling the layer 5 alpha, right, which gives us this map overall. And finally, we can add another layer, which in this case, I don't think we actually need that. So we have basically 5 layers to control the base color for this shader, right? So basically this is the map that controls our base color. Then the next layer color that we have, which is much simpler, is connected to our specular weight, okay? And if I just come here and connect that directly, this is our specular weight map. And what I want to share here with you guys, if I just connect this map here, Basically, when a specific spot here is darker, what we want to do here is to also make it less reflective, and also with a rougher specular reflection. So we're trying to make sure that we have the same pattern going through our base color, our specular weight, our specular roughness. So this darker spot, if I just take a look at here, you can see also in this map is going to have a darker value, and therefore it would be less reflective when this map is connected to the specular weight. Now for the specular weight, as you can see, if I just come down here, we are using this map, which is BW38, as our first layer, okay? And this is going through a ramp float node just to decrease its overall contrast, and because the specular weight value that we were interested in was about 0.2, so we are trying to keep the values of this texture about 0.2. As you can see, the maximum value is 0.3 and the minimum value is about 0.1, so we are keeping that specular weight value that we had in our original standard surface shader in mind. So this is going to be our first layer. And for the second layer, we are using this map BW5 that you can find it in your project files, and this is connected to our layer 2 alpha, okay, or sorry, directly to layer 2, and then the layer 2 blending mode is set to light. And if I just increase the layer 2 alpha, as you can see how it affects it, but we want it to be obviously less effective in this case. Okay, now I'm going very quickly through this tutorial, and as I mentioned, you need to check out our tutorial number 66 and our tutorial number 68. Those are very long tutorials, and I go through every single step very thoroughly, so you need to check those and then come back to this tutorial if you find it very hard to follow. Okay, then so that's our specular weight. And for the specular roughness, if I just connect the map of the specular roughness, you're basically inverting the specular weight, because as I have explained it before, if this map in a specific spot is basically darker and therefore having a less reflection value, less specular weight, we want it to be also rougher. And what we need to do for our specular roughness map is to basically invert this map. So these spots will be brighter and therefore having a higher specular roughness value. And as you can see, if I connect this map directly, even though it's a bit different because I want a different kind of detail, but if I just let's see, go to my first layer here, so you can see we have the same map. Now let me just take a look at the specular roughness map that we have here. Our first layer, let's see, is coming from our BW38 here, and then we used a ramp float node, as you can see. We just simply inverted the values, and the specular roughness, if you remember, it was about 0.2, so we have basically inverted the values. So the parts that were having less specular weight will also be rougher. So that's our first layer. For the second layer, we are using this BW5 map, and this going through this ramp float node. We just inverted the map, okay, and then in the layer color node, as you can see, it has a multiply blending mode, okay, with the layer 2 alpha set to 0.65. Then we have this other map just to add a bit higher frequency detail to our specular roughness. Okay, sorry. So that's the map here. We're just using a ramp float node to make the brighter values a bit darker. And this is going to be our final layer color node. So this is our layer 3. Okay. Then layer 2, and that's our layer 3. The layer 3 blending mode is set to normal, and the layer 3 alpha is 0.32. Okay, so that's our specular roughness map, and this is our shader. And finally, we have obviously the bump map. So the way we have created the bump map, we have basically having two layers, as you can see. The first layer is this BW5 here. Sorry, that's the second layer. The first layer is this BW38 blurred, which is the same map as BW38, but just a blurrier version, just using a Gaussian blur or something like this to make it a bit blurrier, because I didn't want any sharp kind of bumpiness and dents on the surface, because that's now how that paint looked in the reference. So that's a softer version of the same map. Then I've just used the ramp floats node to make sure that these very dark spots on this map wouldn't cause any deep dents on our bump mapping. So I'm using this ramp floats node, as you can see, with the minimum value of 0.125 or about 0.1, just to make those very dark spots a bit brighter. So that's our first layer. And our second layer is basically this BW5 here map. Okay, and if I just get back to the layer color node itself that controls our bump mapping, as you can see, this second layer has a blending mode of normal and an opacity of 0.19. Okay, and this is going to be connected to a bump 2D map, the bump map input of the bump 2D, with the bump height of about 0.025. It can probably be something like 0.01 even, if you want the bump mapping to be less effective. And this is going to be connected to the geometry normal input of the standard surface shader. Okay, and this will give us our green standard surface shader here. Okay, so here is our green, simple, pristine painted wood, right? But the second material is obviously the materials that want to appear on these worn out edges. And this is, if I come down here, this is the standard surface shader that controls that. If I connect it directly, as you can see, it has different shades of that particular wood color that we are interested in. And that is because if you actually take a look at the reference image here, as you can see, we have different shades of that. We have brighter, we have these oranges, there's brownish colors. So that's why I decided to use actually a wood texture to control the base color of the standard surface shader as well. So this is the particular shader. If I run the active shade, IPR, that controls the base color for the standard surface shader. Okay, so wood 0206, you can find this in your project files. Now, the material or the shader itself, if I just connect this directly here, as you can see, has a base weight of 1. We have a very low value for the specular weight, about 0.07, a roughness value of 0.56, so it's pretty rough, and the IR value is set to 3 because we are dealing with wood, and the Fresnel effect is in most cases not that strong. It really depends on the particular example that we are looking at, but probably something like 3 would be enough in this case. Okay, and now we simply have, before actually taking a look at the bump mapping, if I take a look at the alpha map, because this is the final layer node that we have, this will be connected to our Arnold Beauty, right? As you can see, the second shader will only appear on these worn out edges, and obviously we need to create an alpha map, so the second standard surface shader will only appear on those worn out edges and some other spots on the basically model here, right? So if I just take a look at the alpha map that we have here, as you can see, these are the nodes. So let me just connect it directly and see what we have here. So as you can see, this is the final alpha map that will be used. So the second standard surface shader will only appear on these brighter parts of this map. So how we have created it here, first of all, we have this ambient occlusion node. So if I connect it directly, and as you can see, it has a sample value of 6. We have a far clip value of 0.003, and invert normals is enabled. Okay, as I have mentioned in the previous tutorials and in our ultimate introduction to Arnold for Cinema 4D course, we have discussed these maps and these nodes thoroughly, and you should be familiar with them. So here is our ambient occlusion. Now to break this ambient occlusion apart, we are going to multiply this map, which is BW8, using a multiply node. So as you can see in the multiply node, we have our ambient occlusion as the first input and our image, this BW8, as our second input. And we multiply those two inputs and we get this map. Then we use a ramp floats node to simply increase the contrast of the resulting map here. So as you can see, we have simply resetted the map and then grab this point here and put it to basically slide it to the left, so it would kind of increase the contrast here. So as you can see, as I do that, I just add a bit more contrast here. Let me just get back to the original value here. Then this was the first layer of the layer color node. Okay, now if I just get back to this layer color node and disable my second and my third layer, you can see this ambient occlusion and the multiply node are the first layer. Then we are using this image here, just as I mentioned, to add some of these spots that we see on the sideboard here. You can see this spot, for example, these spots, these parts here, that basically showing the underlying wood layer. We are basically using this layer, this texture, which is BW40, okay, to add a bit more of that details. And finally another layer, but this layer would have, if you take a look at the layer color node, layer 3, the opacity is about 0.15, so it wouldn't be that effective. So that's our second layer here. If I just connect the layer color node directly, and this is our third layer. So the second layer adds these spots and points, and then we have the third layer that just adds a bit more of that detail. Okay, and as you can see, layer 2 and layer 3, their blending mode is both set to lighten, so we can actually see the layers that are underneath them. And this is, as you can see, take a look at the map here, this is being connected to our layer 2 alpha. And in this layer color node, as you can see, the first layer is the green standard surface shader. The second layer is the main wood that we have, the underlying layer, and these are layer 1 and layer 2. And then we are using this alpha map to control the layer 2 alpha, which is going to give us this map finally. Okay, now the second standard surface shader, as you can see, also has a bump map. And the way this bump map has been created, we simply use the layer color node that we use to control layer 2 alpha of our main layer node here. Then we used a ramp floats node to basically invert the map. And the reason we did it, obviously, because we want these worn out edges to be just a bit more dented compared to the rest of the surface. So we have this ramp floats here, then this is going to be connected to the bump map input of the bump 2D, and this bump 2D node is being connected to the normal input of our second standard surface shader. Okay, so that's going to give us our final shader. And to create the kind of black version, if you take a look at the picture view, to create this render, what I have done was simply to manipulate the layer color node that controls the base color here, right? So if I go to the second shader here, and if I just connect this and assign it to the wood here, as you can see, this is the exact same shader that we had previously, but right now the layer color node, that is this one, this green layer color node, basically, before connecting it directly to our base color, we have this color correction node in between. So we have connected the output of our layer color node to the input of the color correct node, and the output of the color correct node to the base color input of our standard surface shader. And as you can see, what this color correction node is doing here is basically converting this green map. We have, as you can see, decreased the saturation from 1 to 0, so we get a black and white map, and simply we have decreased the gamma here to about 0.9, so we are getting a darker base color. And as you can see, the rest of the shader is exactly the same. Okay folks, so that's about this tutorial. And I'm not sure if you like this method or you want me to go through like other tutorials to go through every single step. That would be a very long tutorial. I'm not sure if you actually like those long tutorials, but if you like it, let me know so I record this tutorial again using that method. But I think if you watch this tutorial and then you take a look at the project files that you can download it, and the link is in the description, I think it would be a lot more useful. You can quickly take a look at the tutorial and then check out the shader itself. Okay, so thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Vimeo, Facebook, and Twitter to see more video tutorials. Thanks for watching this free video tutorial from mographplus.com. If you are interested in learning Arnold 5 for Cinema 4D fundamentally, please make sure to check out our Ultimate Introduction to Arnold 5 for Cinema 4D course, which is a massive 10-hour long course in which we explore all the aspects of Arnold for Cinema 4D thoroughly.